It was a good visit.
Oh, good.
Greg and him, you know, I don't talk about. They've known each other a long time.
Yeah.
More than I have. I mean, I didn't know him outside of prison,
Yeah.
but it was good.
Good. We need some more erasers. I saw you stole mine.
Yeah, we need some more. I don't know where they go. I understand the markers dry out, we throw them away, but where's the erasers go? You know?
Somebody needs one, somebody put one down.
But if every board has one, then every board has one.
Yeah, well, you know, you got kids that
Hide
have to
stuff,
play
hide
together. And, well, no, I'm just, you know, you get 2 or 3 young ones on the board, they all have to have an eraser too.
stuff. Yeah.
So there are probably a couple on the boards down there. It's just as much fun to erase it as it is to draw sometimes. Oh, you did get your, I was like, he doesn't have his phone. And I made sure I got here and claimed mine before you took it. You took the table.
I've got 3 of them, but I need more because I keep having to move them around.
Oh, you're not using the stool? You can sit down.
No.
Well, you have fun standing.
I see kids, I don't see her, maybe you're covering up her.
Morning, sir.
I don't know, so which one am I doing?
You got 2 choices. Go down the left road, right road.
Yep, this is it. Hey, David.
Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are y'all?
We're good, how are you?
This morning.
Good. Good to see y'all.
You got the
Weekend.
camera today?
I do have it, yes.
Okay,
ma'am.
good. That's good. Emmett will like that. I think.
Oh, yeah.
You want me to sit over
Yeah,
here?
you can sit in front of the
Alright.
camera there.
Behind it, not in front.
Okay, okay.
Oh, we're early
I
today.
know it, I know it.
Oh, do we have any handouts or whatever?
No, ma'am.
Not today? Okay, that's fine.
Yeah. I may get there, but
You
didn't have
do
anything
You
today.
do
That's
an
fine.
exceptional job on
Yeah.
your study guides, I'm telling you.
Appreciate it. Hope it helps people.
Yeah.
I just know that just talking to people and comments people made, they were sometimes struggling to take notes.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes the preacher would preach fast or I would preach fast. And
Right,
they're trying to take notes and I couldn't take notes. You know, my
Yeah.
wife and, you know, some other people. And so I'm
right.
like, well, I can just help you and give you something to help you take notes.
There you
Yeah.
go,
Hopefully
there
it
you
helps
go.
people and they seem to enjoy it.
Well, some of us don't see that well to
Yeah.
read, and yeah, so it's okay.
But we're getting there, we're
We
getting
Yeah.
there.
do our best, yeah. I like the instead of topics, I enjoy the study of the Bible, of the books. You
Yeah.
know, that's, yeah.
Yeah. I enjoy teaching that the most, a book.
Yeah,
This one's kind of a hybrid, so we'll see how it goes. Each quarter, we're going to try to do at least a textual study,
Okay,
because we have 3 classes
I
now
like
we
that.
offer, and we'll try to keep them different, topical. The ladies' class, we may have like 2 topical, and then 1 textual. I tend to like the textual better. It's easier to teach and study for. Topical one, I don't know. Sometimes it's challenging
it could be.
to know the
Good.
topic well enough to be comfortable to teach it.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes that's how you grow. That's how you
Oh, yeah.
there you go, that way.
teach us something you don't
need
know,
it all, I
you're
guess.
not familiar with.
Yeah.
Well, classroom teacher, he's the one who learns the most, so.
Yeah,
I guess so.
that's right.
Hey,
Good morning,
Hello,
good
good
morning.
Good morning.
What's up, Andrew? How you doing?
I'm doing well, sir. How are you? How you guys doing?
Going
Doing fine,
great, how
thank
about
you.
yourself?
it was chilly this morning.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was like, I gotta bust out a sweater.
I
feels
know
good.
it. Me, I don't
And it
know.
still felt kind of chilly, like,
Yeah, it is.
but I just think in about a month, it'll be
yeah.
105, and we're all gonna be going, I wish it was cool.
Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna
You're right
enjoy it
about
while I
that.
can.
You're right about that.
Well, summer's approaching.
Oh, David, I tried to sign us up on the Light Post, and I don't do the smartphone. But on the computer, I don't see anywhere to do those things, to sign up. You know, doesn't have an option to sign up.
Interesting. I haven't looked on the computer. I'll look.
Everybody's
There.
smartphone intelligent, and I'm not. So.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we've had that issue a couple of times. People just don't have phones or a smartphone. But
Yeah,
you should be able to do it on the computer. But I'll have to look at that.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
there may be a setting on yours too that we need to change. There's been a couple of people that have had issues with just the setting wasn't turned on
Yeah,
to register, so we can hopefully change that.
yeah.
Need a place for Mike Adams to
Oh, yeah, to have a
park
place
when he
to
comes
sit.
in. I wonder what would be best for him.
He has the chair, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
that's
Uh-huh.
right.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
He could probably do that.
I brought my son with me Friday.
Good morning.
morning.
Good, what?
I brought Garrett with me Friday.
Huh?
To
Oh, to work?
Yeah.
Where you sitting out there?
Yeah?
Because I usually, that's the day I get to like hang out with him because he's home
Peyton.
from school. He's like,
I have something for Peyton.
online school on
Sweetie.
Fridays.
Is he?
He's
here?
on his
Right,
way.
in 3 weeks. I'll be.
He's not quite here yet, but he's on
Okay.
his way. I
Something
just
we
checked
could do
his.
together.
All right,
I'll
I'll
finally have.
try to get it to him.
Does he want to
Yeah.
work there or just?
He just wants to. He just wanted to
Learn?
do something. Yeah, oh yeah,
Yeah?
yeah, yeah. I'm
Yeah.
still trying to find him a car.
Good luck with that.
Good Lord,
Peyton had his first wreck, then we trying to find him another car. And it was-
Uh-oh.
he's okay though, right?
Oh, it was in February, but I'm
Okay.
saying, trying to find a decent car
It's
under 10,000 is impossible.
man,
Oh, yeah.
under 10,000. I'm trying to find 5,000, and it's impossible.
For a decent car, yeah.
I mean, I
The decent one, yeah.
I mean, just want to get him back towards school and work, but still.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
I got Grayson. I bought him an 02 Dodge Dakota.
Okay.
Had 180,000 miles on it. No wrecks. Everything worked on it. Cold AC. Got it for $4,500.
Wow.
Right. It's got 206,000 miles on it now.
200.
And after between that time, water pump. Well, I mean, there's still the stuff that breaks on it. It's gonna happen. I mean, I'm just waiting for it. I mean, now I know it's sorted, and it needs a power steering pump now.
Okay.
So I'll be doing that next weekend.
We've got a 2015 Honda Civic now. We've already put 700 on it, with a couple of several parts. And then now it needs some mass air sensor, because it's too lean with the gas or something.
You can clean those.
I know, but
I know. I'm with you. I'm just the
I
effort.
want to replace the belts, because the belts aren't wore out, but with a 10-year-old vehicle,
Yeah.
it's worn. And there's a couple of things, but I
We
told
bought it for 5,500. There's a guy down in Noonan that is a
it's a small
he's a
dealership.
bail bondsman.
Is it on Greenville?
Greason Trail.
I'm sorry.
Greason Trail.
I don't think I wrapped it today. See what they got in the parking lot.
Yeah, because he gets cars for people who are trying to get out of jail and they don't, they lose them. And so he keeps them.
He's got some pretty good deals.
How many miles were on the Honda?
192.
That's braking miles for a Honda.
It wasn't
Yeah.
bad. And there was a couple other ones we were looking at for 90.
I love my son, but that Nash stubbornness he got in his head that the Honda Civic was a dependable car, which it is.
It is.
But he didn't want to look at anything else. I said, son, when I was 16, my daddy said, I'm going to get you a car, not a specific car.
Oh, my son's been like, hey, Dad, there's an 84 Camaro in Riverdale. And I'm like, no. Like, he wants project cars. And I'm like,
Yeah,
if that's your second vehicle, go for it.
that's different.
But no, you're going to be graduating in 3 weeks and you need something to drive.
Thank you. You've made me feel better this morning.
Oh,
I
no.
thought I was the only one in this
Well,
boat.
Garrett's at this point now, he'll whatever I get him, he'll be happy with.
Yeah.
See, his other thing too is I bought him a motorcycle about a year ago, like a fixer-upper, a toy.
Right.
We spent a year taking the motor out, rebuilding the whole thing, and yesterday I took him on his first ride on the road. And I didn't tell Holly till he got back,
Oh, Lord.
because I would have,
Got in big trouble.
I would have never left the yard. But he did so good. I was hoping he did
Good.
awesome. He did install it. we did a lot of riding in the neighborhood before.
Right.
I would let him on a regular road. And what I told him was that the fact that he's been driving a car for a good bit now, he's aware of what's out there.
Yeah.
So it's not like totally blind, but he's going to go to a ride. He's going to a riding school in June.
We went, what's the name of it? The driving school?
It's run by Carter County Police.
There was a bad wreck 15, 20 years ago in Noonan, and they started this driving school
For teenagers.
for teenagers.
Yeah.
And Peyton went to it, and he learned so much.
Oh, both my boys went to driving school.
And we got a
Absolutely.
discount on the insurance because
Amen.
of it. So they
Grayson-
had the ball tires and had to go through the course and do the quick turn.
Grayson, on his senior year, still didn't have his license. Grayson went to a private school till like 10th grade. Garrett's still there. He went to Whitewater, and he was in no business, had no rush to get his license. Well, then he went to school, and he's like, everyone's got their license, they're gonna get, right? So the first day of school, senior year, he drove to school with Holly, got in an accident.
Oh,
First day, with Holly in the car. And then the guy sued us. It was crazy.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, absolutely nuts. And then my insurance went,
Ours doubled.
oh,
Doubled.
yeah, no.
Peyton we were coming up to a red light right up north of East Coweta High School. And he ran into the back of another student.
Brother, how you doing?
Yeah. They teach you not to travel too close.
Feeling good?
But
right.
this was in February.
Totaled the car though, huh?
Oh yeah.
Look, you.
It was a
Going on, David?
How you doing?
Well,
2012 Ford Edge,
Yeah.
Oh
and
yeah.
the whole hood was all buckled. But the girl's car,
Yeah.
the whole back end, it was a little
Right.
Hyundai or something. It was all tore
It
up.
was pretty cool.
Mine doubled over, but I reduced it, just raised my collision comprehensive a little bit, and it basically reduced it half. Okay,
We're about to add Maggie, so.
Oh yeah, that's what happened to me. I just added mine, and it was like, and it's gonna be like that till I think it's 23 is when it finally starts going down. What?
my sister tried to do that in Massachusetts and couldn't do that. That's the shenanigans that happens in Massachusetts. But the story of the morning for me so far is my sister's found over $12,000 in a boot of my mother's.
oh my
In
goodness.
a boot?
Wow.
2 gold watches that were my grandfather's, and old money. I call it old money because it's like the silver certificates and the gold certificates.
Yeah.
When I worked at Burger King in a Jewish part of town, I used to bring that home, and she would exchange it out for me.
Cool.
So we were wondering where it went, and now we know.
In a boot.
Over $12,000. And now they're, well, what do we do with it?
Buy cars.
All right, well, it's good to see everyone this morning. Time for us to start. Let me talk a little bit about our class before we get into our study. So it is a new quarter, and we have each quarter, we offer 3 classes now, and we always want to offer a textual study. We always will. So we have 2 topical studies, one upstairs for the ladies class, and then next door is a topical study. And again, we always want those classes, or at least 2 of the classes, even if they're topical, to be somewhat different, vastly different than each other, so that we cover a lot of ground, I guess, with 2 different topical, and then a textual. So this would technically be the textual study class. It is going through the book of Genesis, but it is a little bit different than going verse by verse, chapter by chapter. And so we're not necessarily doing that. We're going through Genesis, but we're looking at life lessons. What can we learn from the book of Genesis and how to apply it? And so we will go through the book, and we'll look at some chapters, we'll look at some major events in the book of Genesis. So hopefully in doing that, it will remind us what is recorded within the book of Genesis as we go through the book. But really, we're doing it in a way that we're looking at here's a lesson that we learn in the book of Genesis. And what's so interesting about the book of Genesis is it is a major battleground, let's describe it that way, in the world, in the religious versus secular world. There's a lot of people in our culture and our world who try to disclaim the book of Genesis a lot of different ways for a lot of different reasons. For example, some see the creation account as a poem, that it's just simply a poem rather than a historical record. And so the book of Genesis is highly debated, whether or not it was an actual account, it's real, the events are real, or if it's just fiction, if the creation account is literal. Even those in the religious world may argue about the creation account not being a literal creation account, but that a lot of it may be literal, but for example, that a day. So we believe the creation account, 6 literal days, 6 literal 24-hour days. Each day, 6 days, God created the world. But some will argue out there that it wasn't 24 hours in a day. It was thousands and thousands of years or hundreds of years. Each day consisted of a much longer time span than what we know as a day. And all that does is discredit God and the power of God to create the world in 6 literal days. And so there's a lot of contentious arguing, debating. It's a battleground in the book of Genesis. And maybe more so than any other book in the Bible. I don't really know that for sure, but there's a lot that happens in the book of Genesis that people try to discredit. So one of the things that we're trying to do is go to the book of Genesis that we as Christians believe to be a historical, accurate account of history going all the way back to the creation of the world. And what we're doing is we're looking at the book and what can we learn from it, because it is an accurate, inspired, historical book. And so what can we learn from that? So here are the arenas. I like to call them arenas of thoughts. So we're going to go through and talk about God. And, well, let me back up a little bit. This morning, we have to start in Genesis chapter 1, right? And we have to talk about, before we even talk about creation, which will be next Sunday morning, hopefully. We'll talk about lessons from creation. Before we even get there, we have to start before creation. Because even in Genesis 1 and verse 1, before God even spoke and before God even created, in the beginning, God, right? So, the very beginning of everything is God. Even before he spoke and there was light, and spoke and there was anything else, there was God. And so our lesson this morning is the origin of the Creator. The origin of the Creator. And so we'll walk through... I can't talk and spell at the same time. That's why I'm not a teacher writing on a board. I don't know how y'all do it, Keith. I don't know if you did it a lot. Stacy, I'm sure, does it all the time. The origin of the Creator. So there's our lesson today. We're going to go all the way to Genesis 1 and verse 1. But here's the arenas of thought that we're going to walk through, talking about the origin of the Creator. In the beginning, God. It's the 4th word in our Bible. The 4th word in our Bible will lay the foundation for everything else that comes afterwards. And so once we're introduced to the 4th word of the Bible, in the beginning, God. When we're introduced to Him and we learn about Him and who He is, and we lay that foundation and we learn certain lessons, then there's a lot that follows all the way throughout the Bible that makes a lot more sense. But these are the arenas of thought we'll walk through this morning. God in our culture, the world in which we live, how do they see God versus the way we see God, what they say about God, a belief in any God, really. Where did God come from? Let's ask that question. But we're going to walk through some very logical questions. Because the world will argue one thing, and what they will argue will lead to, well, if this is true, then the only logical explanation is that there was a God that existed before all of this. So we'll get there, and it'll make a little bit more sense. And then we'll think about who is God. And hopefully all of these arenas of thought, these three arenas of thought, in each one, we'll come to the conclusion that there has to be a God. There has to be a God. So, again, the origin of the Creator. With each of these points, we'll come to the conclusion that there has to be a Creator. And that's our lesson from Genesis this morning. Before we get to really, and I'm going through a book. It is a book. It's not my own thoughts. In the beginning, Life Lessons from Genesis from Justin Rogers. Justin is a Bible professor at Freed-Hardeman, and I really admire him and his work. He's my age, I think, or a little bit older, maybe a year or two older, and he has a doctorate degree in the Hebrew language, or something similar to that. I may be wrong on his credentials, but he's very, very well educated in the Hebrew language, and I admire his work. So we're going through his book. The book of Genesis, let's think about it for just a moment before we get to our main thoughts this morning. Genesis provides the foundation upon which the whole of God's revelation rests. So think about that for just a moment. If you and I do not know what takes place in the book of Genesis, there's a whole lot in the rest of the Bible that you and I would not understand. And so the whole of God's revelation, the Bible, the Word of God, rests really upon the accounts in the book of Genesis. And so when we understand Genesis, there's a lot later on in Scripture, even in the New Testament, that will make a lot more sense to us, and we can understand it when we get there. For example, Jesus and his apostles in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, a lot of their teachings were brought out of the book of Genesis. They referred and referenced the book of Genesis often. Much of the New Testament then would be incomprehensible without knowledge of the book of Genesis. Paul, teaching on justification by faith in Romans chapter 4. Come on in. Paul teaching on justification builds his argument around Abraham. Right? How Abraham was justified by faith. So if you don't know the book of Genesis, you don't know Abraham. So then when you get to Paul's argument in Romans chapter 4, we don't understand Abraham and what Abraham did, Abraham and Sarah, then we don't understand Paul's argument. But when we understand both. Again, Paul in 1 Timothy chapter 2, Paul begins an explanation of gender roles within the church. And his argument is based upon Adam and Eve. And so if you don't know who Adam and Eve are, you don't know what happened with Adam and Eve in the garden, you don't know how Satan came in the form of a serpent and tempted Eve, and she was deceived and gave it to Adam. And if you don't know the events there, then it's really difficult, if not impossible, to understand what Paul is saying to the church when he writes to Timothy in 1 Timothy chapter 2. And so with all of that said, it is difficult to understand the rest of the Bible if we don't understand Genesis. And when we understand Genesis, so much else is revealed and opened up to us. Let's talk just for a moment. We've already talked about it briefly, that Genesis has long been a major battlefield between belief and unbelief, those who do believe and those who do not believe. For example, some see the creation account as a poem rather than a historical record, and it's even written that way, or at least it's written in poetic type, because perhaps the translators saw it as a poem rather than a historical account. In the 2011 edition of the NIV, it sets it in poetic type. It's the same type that you would see the book of Psalms written in. It's written in a very different type, more narrow, like it's written in line by line like a poem. And it's written that way in the 2011 edition of the NIV, maybe indicating that they see it as a poem. Even still today, Adam and Eve are fundamental in issues with the current transgender emphasis. A lot out there with that argument that Adam and Eve and the current transgender emphasis. Kids in our Christian school colleges are being taught that the Genesis flood was a local phenomenon and not global, that it was local and not worldwide. And so Genesis, again, just a few examples there, long been a battleground, major battleground between believers and unbelievers. Let's begin our thoughts with this. In 1882, Friedrich Nietzsche, do you know what he's famous for saying? There was a whole article that came out. In fact, my dad said that he has a CBS Evening News transcript where this particular theory came out in 1966 from Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. Don't know what he was famous for saying? There's actually 2 movies based on it. I think there's 2. But it's to combat what was originally said, that God is dead, right? So that's what Friedrich Nietzsche originally said, that God is dead. And there's 2 movies that have come out recently, faith-based movies, to argue that God is not dead. But we go back to Friedrich Nietzsche's original statement that God is dead. And the emphasis behind that statement was that if you believe in God, and not just God of the Bible, but really any God, that if you believe in any God, that you're foolish, that you're undereducated, that you are weak-minded and superstitious because God is dead. And we still see that mindset in our world today, that anyone who believes in God, the God of the Bible especially, but really any God, if you believe in a God, then you're just a superstitious, uneducated person. And again, this is laying our foundation because we're talking about the origin of the creator of the universe, who to us is the one and only true God. And so we have to battle that argument and that mindset in the world in which we live. God is dead, and anyone who believes in a God, and it seems as though the Christian God is ridiculed more than other gods. Because when you think about the Christian God, they argue that everything we believe with our God, that our God put on flesh, so he's half God, half man. How weird is that? How foolish is that? That he lived among humanity and that he died on the cross. How can God die? Well, that's the whole point of putting on flesh. How can God die? And that he was buried and that he came back to life 3 days later. And that's just something that is so foolish to believe. Even Paul would say that the crucifixion to those that are perishing is foolish. Right? Didn't he say that? But to us that are being saved, it's the power of God. It's foolish to believe in the God of the Bible. So I hope that leads us, or lays a little bit of a foundation for us, thinking about the book of Genesis, thinking about its proper place in our Bible. The word Genesis, just for our thoughts this morning, means beginnings or origins. So it is a book that tells us the beginning of everything that we know, pretty much. It tells us the beginning of the world. It will tell us the beginning of the human race. It will tell us the beginning of the Israelite nation with Abraham. It tells us so many beginnings or origins, how things started or began. And so, what are some lessons we learned from the book of Genesis? All right, the origins of the Creator. Let's go through these arenas of thought. Let's think about God in our culture. Friedrich Nietzsche really kind of influenced our culture, or at least a lot in our culture are influenced by him and his philosophy that God is dead. Our society is very skeptical of a belief in God. That's the world in which we live. Now, not everyone is aggressive if they disagree with you. You may have neighbors, friends, family members who do not believe in God, and they're not aggressive towards you. They're not mean and hateful. Maybe that's because they're just nicer people. They're more respectable people. But outside of that, there are people in this world that are very hostile towards Christians and people that believe in God. And they are very hateful, and they don't want to be your friend, and they would never hire you. In fact, if they find out your belief, they would fire you if they employed you. And so the world in which we live is very skeptical of a belief in God. That is just our culture. And he brings out the argument in the book, and he asks the question, does this type of culture originate in our school system as they are taught in our public schools, evolution? Is that where this thought begins? That our middle schoolers, if not younger, elementary and middle and high schoolers are being taught evolution. I was taught it a little bit in a community college in Little Rock. However, my instructor at the time was a Baptist. He was a believer, and he did not believe in evolution, but he had to teach it from the textbook. He could not teach creation. And he told us that in class. And so it was very interesting. He could tell us that he disagreed with what the textbook said, and he could tell us, or at least he could hint at what he believed. He just couldn't teach what he believed, right? So he asks the question in the book, as we think about our culture, how did we get here? Is it a result of organic evolution being taught in our schools? Well, it's probably a contributing factor for sure. It's not the only thing, but it is for sure a contributor. I would like to think that those that believe in God and follow God are still a majority. We are somewhat of a Christian nation, if we can use that phrase and that term. There's a lot of people that believe in God, and I would like to think that we are still a majority, but the question is, for how much longer are we the majority? Anything taught for as long as evolution has been taught must have long-term effects. And so we live in a culture now where evolution is being taught more than creation, and that everything around us is a result of not a God, but evolution and a Big Bang. And there's also a term out there, a phrase or a term, as we think about our culture. Again, God and our culture. We're building, hopefully, some steps. We'll get to God, who is God, but we have to first think about our culture. Because in just a moment, we're going to try to argue, or at least we're going to try to learn from the arguments that culture makes about God, the origin of God. So our culture, evolution in schools, God is dead. There's a term, because you see, atheism has changed throughout the years. Years ago, atheism used to be a philosophical view where you got to this point in your life that philosophically you truly believe that there is no God. And it has somewhat shifted throughout the years, and it's no longer this philosophical view, it's more now of a lifestyle. So it's not just something you believe, but yet you're still a good person, you just don't believe in a God. It has shifted towards, in our culture, now it is a lifestyle. And it's what's referred to as practical atheism, where people, even if they believe in God, they live like there is no God. And so it's a lifestyle now. that we want to live however we want to live. And some will justify that by saying there is no God, so I'll live however I want to live. But practical atheism even includes those who say, well, there is a God, but you still live however you want to live. You see, atheism now is a lifestyle. I will and want to live however I want to live. Atheism has shifted in our culture and our society. Intellectual arrogance truly rules the day. The Bible teaches us that as we transition from culture to where did God come from? This is a question that's long been asked, not even just by Christians, but by your atheists, your skeptics. They ask the question, well, if your God is true and real, where did God come from? We even in the church ask that question, but we might be at a point in our Christian walk where we understand, well, God had no beginning. There was no origin of God. He's always existed, and we understand that. We've gone from milk to meat, and we understand that God has no beginning. But the question, where did God come from? Let's try to make a few arguments that are made to try to disprove God, or at least some other arguments that people make in the world, that actually indeed prove that there is a God, or at least a creator. That there is a creator. We're not as much proving that the God that is that God is the one true God, and the one true God is the God of the Bible. We're just talking about the creator, the origin of the creator. How can we know that the God of the Bible created everything? So where did God come from? In Genesis chapter 1. Well, let's ask this question. Because there's people in the world who unknowingly will argue some of these same arguments. And we take those arguments and we use them to prove that there is a creator. So let's ask this question. Well, where did wind come from? Did you feel the wind this morning? Did you feel the wind walking from your car to the building? Where did wind come from? Yesterday was pretty windy. We went to visit, a church member. I'm not going to share a lot of details, but we went to visit a church member who's up near Chattanooga. My family and Greg and Amy, and we went up this weekend to visit. And we went up near Chattanooga in Lafayette, Georgia, Rock Springs, in the mountains. It was very windy. In fact, it was so windy, the wind was what was cold. The temperature wasn't that cold. It was just the wind that was blowing and cold, and the boys were cold, and we all took, light jackets. It was cold. It was just very windy. Where did the wind come from, we might ask? And some would argue a very scientific argument. They might tell you what wind is. Well, when this happens in the atmosphere, and this happens in the atmosphere, and all these conditions meet together, then you have wind. And so when you ask the question, where did wind come from? They will argue maybe, well, this is what wind is. But we're not asking what wind is. We're asking, where did it originate? Where did wind come from? And so then in the world, in culture, you'll have this argument. They'll say, well, wind has just always been there. Because they don't know where it came from. And so they say, well, it's just always been. In fact, Jesus mentioned something very similar, and I'm going to take the time to turn there because Jesus talked about the wind in John chapter 3. John chapter 3. And verse 8. Jesus said, the wind blows where it wishes, and you hear the sound of it, but cannot know where it comes and where it goes. So is everyone who is born of the Spirit. Very interesting that the Hebrew word for spirit can also be translated wind. But Where does wind come from? Well, the argument that you'll hear, well, we don't know where it came from. It's just always been. So let's ask this question. Where does water come from? I've got some water this morning. My throat's bothered me the last week or so. Where does water come from? Again, you might get a very scientific explanation. Well, when hydrogen and oxygen, when the conditions are right, what is it? 2 parts hydrogen and 1 part oxygen, or is it the other way around? 1 part hydrogen, 2 part oxygen.
H2.
Other way around.
H2.
2 hydrogen, 1 oxygen. When it comes together, it creates water. Okay, well, we know what water is. We're asking, where did it come from? And then someone might say, well, you have the water cycle. You have, evaporation and condensation, and well, that's how water is recycled on the earth. But where did it come from? What is the origin of water? Again, culture will say, well, it's just always been there. And so they can't explain when, it's just always been there. They can't explain the origin of water, it's just always been there. So if it's easy for non-believers to agree and to argue that wind has always been there, that water has always been there, why is it so ridiculous for us to say that God has always been there? Yes, sir.
Because wind and rain you can feel and see. You can't see God, quote unquote.
I understand that argument, but they both require a level of faith, right? To believe that water has just always been there, you don't know how to explain its origin. That's a level of faith, that the water's always been there. But you can't, I see your argument.
I mean, if you go back to what most people who believe in evolution, they go back to the Big Bang, or some form of the Big Bang, right?
Okay.
So I think one of the things is with that whole thing is that if you can go to the point of the Big Bang, that is truly the beginning of the world, right? The part of it with God is, like you said, God has always been. You can't explain the beginning of God, like what happened for God to exist. Okay. So that's really hard to get someone to understand and take. It is. And
it may be hard to have that conversation with someone who truly is at a point that they don't believe. And it may be hard to get them from unbelief to believing, and that might require a very different conversation for us this morning. But I think for all of us in here, we see the logic. We see the argument that if culture says something's always been there, right? And they say that it's ridiculous to believe that your God's always been there. Well, we this morning, I think we see the logic there. And we're just building. We have some other arguments that I think are stepping stones to understand the origin of the Creator. Right? Does that make sense at all? Right?
Yeah.
You got an argument? You got a question?
The answer I always give about Big Bang is, what Big Bang have you ever seen put order along with it that we see in the world?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Order, yeah. You ever seen an explosion and things are put in order? Yeah.
In order to explain evolution, they keep adding millions and millions of years.
Yeah, have to have more time for all this stuff to happen and take place, yeah. So that's a good point, Paul, the order. And again, I think we have some more arguments we're about to get to that I think are a little better arguments. I don't know if they're better. They're just, I don't know how to describe them. What you got?
I was about to say, like, one of the easiest arguments is, like what you were saying before about the Big Bang, the randomness of it all, right? It's just the fact that there's intelligent design.
Okay.
I mean, if you look at the world, look at how many things are dependent on another thing happening, and it just goes forever.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's not random. That's intelligent design. That didn't just happen
Yeah,
because of an explosion,
Right.
and then it just multiplied, and here we appeared. 6 billion years later. I don't see anybody with any education can believe in that kind of randomness.
That's right.
And that's always been an argument that I've often said. Like, I'll be the first one to admit, I was an evolutionist. I believed in dinosaurs and cavemen and all that stuff. But the more I started reading, the more ridiculous it's. I mean, literally, and I'm not a scientist, but the more ridiculous it sounds to believe that we became what we are now from some slimy thing that crawled out of the water. It just doesn't make sense.
Sure.
None of it does.
And it doesn't make sense. And so that's the point, I think, of this class, or at least this beginning lesson, is we understand those don't make sense. Those arguments don't make sense. But I guess if that's the only thing you've been taught ever since school, and you've been truly brainwashed, then, and that's what you believe, that is what makes sense to you. But to us this morning, where we look at it, and we say, well, that doesn't make sense, right? And I think that's the lesson we're getting at, or we're trying to build this morning as we go to the Bible, and we believe in that fourth word of the book of Genesis. In the beginning, God. We believe that. And so, just for a little bit of time, because I want to run out of time here. We got about 7 or 8 minutes left. So just building logically, the world, the culture, the society in which we live will argue that there are some things like water and wind that they cannot explain the origin. It's just always been there. Yes, sir.
You said something just a while ago, said in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So when God created the heavens and the earth, He provided everything on the earth that you would need to survive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It has. Yeah. Absolutely. And so with this argument, before we move on, everything that we have can be traced back to its origin. That's another important, I think, key here or fact. Everything we have, for example, this Bible, right? It's leather. I could probably somehow maybe I probably couldn't do it now, but I know this leather came from a cow, right? It's calf skin. So I know that this leather can be traced back to an origin somewhere, the cow. The paper, I can say, well, where did this paper come from? Well, we know the origin of where it came from. It came from trees somewhere. And so it began as a tree, and that tree began as a seed. So that seed was planted in a tree, and then it was turned into paper. So I can take this Bible, and I can trace it back to its origin. But with water and wind, it's a little bit more difficult. When you ask, well, what's the origin of wind? Where did it come from? That's just always been here. So it's a little bit more difficult to explain. Well, I don't know where it came from. What about water? Well, water's just always been here. Okay, well, what's the origin? I don't know. It doesn't have one. So then logically, for us this morning, if culture can argue that something has always been, like wind and water, then we're just like standing back here and like, well, we understand that it's also easy to believe that God has always been. But for time, let's think about a little bit more. Let's think about the nature of life. It's under this point. Where did God come from? The nature of life. Let's think about a fact for just a moment, or another argument, thought, that we can explain that God has always existed by the nature of life itself. Life itself. The fact that life exists at all is evidence of a living creator. Here's the point. Here's the argument. Non-living things cannot produce something living. Okay? We know that. That is scientific. Go out here into the yard that is really nicely and well manicured. Thanks to Lawrence. Appreciate the work. Go out here and find a rock. Find anything that is non-living, and watch it and monitor it for as long as you want. And that rock will never produce anything that is living. Non-living cannot produce living. Non-living cannot produce living. Now, something that is living can produce something that is living and non-living. If someone were to give you a jar of honey, it's not a living thing, it's honey. But what do you know about its origin? That it came from something living, right? So the bees that are living produced something that is non-living. And so something that is non-living, for example, you did not get the honey out of a rock. You got it from a bee. Living can only produce, something that is living, alive, can only produce something else that is living. And so then it makes sense that only a living creator, going back to intelligent design, but under the umbrella of this argument, it makes sense then that whatever created everything had to be something living. And so you think about the Big Bang Theory, and this is not necessarily an argument against evolution or a study of evolution in this class, but if you go all the way back in creation to the very beginning, there was something floating around. Something was there, gases or a speck of something that was non-living. If it was living, then you're getting a little bit closer to God. So then you would say, well, if you can go all the way back before the Big Bang and there was something living, well, that sounds like a God to me. But they would argue that it's non-living. It was just gases that exploded.
The primordial.
But we know, again, here's the argument. Where did God come from? But we know that living things, you and I this morning, cannot come from something non-living. It has never happened. And again, for us this morning, Christians in this classroom, hopefully a little bit mature in our faith, we understand the logic there that everything that we have living had to be created by something else living. Now, there's an argument as well to be made, or at least something that we need to understand in this point, is that God created things to be self-perpetuating, right? So, for example, a pine tree will produce another pine tree. So you take a monkey. It will produce more monkeys. A monkey will not produce a dog or a cat. Even a dog will not produce a cat, and vice versa. Right? We understand that a dog will produce dogs, cats will produce cats, gorillas will produce gorillas, pine trees will produce pine trees, apple trees will produce apple trees. And so living, it is self-perpetuating, pine trees and pine trees. A pine tree will not produce an apple tree. But here's the argument. A couple this morning, and this is all we have time for because our time is out. Where did wind come from? Water. It's always been. Well, we understand that they were created by God, and God has always been. Well, what about life? Where did life come from? It cannot come from something that is non-living. We know that. We know that today. They'll argue that. And it's interesting that you'll sit with someone in a science class, and they'll tell you that life or living cannot come from non-living. And they'll argue that, but then at the same time, they'll tell you in the same breath, maybe even, they'll tell you that everything in the world came from something that is non-living. And so what do we learn from that? Well, we don't have time to go into any more notes or anything that I have here. We didn't get here. But if I can summarize the key point here, we are battling culture. And we understand that. That's just the world in which we live. We may live in a world that ridicules what we believe in our God, but we know that God is real and that He created the world, and we live in this culture. Where did God come from? There are so many arguments that the world will try to make that logically don't make sense, and I think that's our point this morning when we go to the Bible. They will argue things that we can take and turn it around on its head and say, well, logically, this doesn't make sense. And we see that. So we need to argue logic. And although the world may not think logically at times, we do. And but who is God? The God who created the world is so much more than just creator. And so what we cannot do is stop in Genesis chapter 1. He is the creator, yes, but the creator of the world and the universe has a plan for humanity. And so he's creator, yes, but he is so much more than just creator. Who is God? Well, we don't have time to talk about him a whole lot more. Let me give you this and then you're done, because think about some names of God. Thinking about some names of God. When we read the Bible, beginning in Genesis 1, verse 1, in the beginning God, but the two primary names of God in the Old Testament. So just think about this. The two primary names of God in the Old Testament are God and Lord. Those are the primary names of God. God and Lord. The name God indicates in and of itself creator or a divine being. So God is in and of himself a reference to creator or a divine being that has always existed. The name Lord means eternal existing one. In Exodus chapter 3, when when Moses said, who should I tell Pharaoh and all the Egyptians sent me? When I go to Egypt, who do I say sent me here? And God said, you tell them I am who I am. And if I can paraphrase that, it means I am the God who has always existed. That's who you tell sent you. And I don't know how to build that into our argument right now because we're out of time. But anyway, that's our thoughts this morning. Thank you for being here. We'll be in Genesis 2, 3 next week, I think, talking more about creation. Thoughts, questions? All right. Thanks for being here. Yeah, man. I like this. I love this. I appreciate your comments.
Okay. Got it here? Got it?
Yeah. Good to see you. We just because I may intentionally or unintentionally call you Larry. But if
You might feel better with all the chart stuff we've been dealing with.
How you doing?
So patient. Go ahead, go out. Good lesson, David.
Yeah.